Hi, everybody. We're going to wait a minute to allow some of the other attendees to filter in before we get started today. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Campbell with the Food Institute, and on behalf of DMA, I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar on the explosion of ghost kitchens and virtual brands. We here at the Food Institute have been tracking the food industry for over 90 years. And in the last year, we have accelerated our programming of podcasts, webinars, and other digital content. We'd invite you to visit foodinstitute.com to learn more about membership, sponsorship, and advertising opportunities. And with that said, I'll introduce today's moderator. Jonathan Mays, Restaurant Business Editor-in-Chief, is a longtime industry journalist who writes about restaurant finance, mergers, and acquisitions in the economy, with a particular focus on quick service restaurants. He'll be moderating today's session on what might be the most impactful and popular trend for chains right now, virtual brands and ghost kitchens. Jonathan will be joined by Joy Lai, COO of Kitchen United, Scott Barton, partner at Let Us Entertain You, and John Miller, CEO of Denny's. Each of their brands have made news in the past few weeks for their innovative activity in the space, and we'll share what they've learned in the process. And with that, Jonathan, we'll turn it over to you to set the stage and then get the perspective of the panelists.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you very much to my friends over at DMA for hosting this. This is a fantastic panel and a really, really big topic, talking about virtual brands and ghost kitchens. I can't actually begin to tell you how important of a topic this is or how big. It's basically dominated my brain over the past couple of weeks. And to me, I mean, if you take these two together, virtual brands and ghost kitchens, they represent probably the single biggest trend in the restaurant industry today. So before I get into things a little bit, I do want to actually explain how we at Restaurant Business see the difference. A ghost kitchen is sort of like a facility that houses potentially many different virtual brands or delivery-only concepts. And a ghost kitchen can go pretty much anywhere there is kitchen space. So you've seen them in regular facilities, of course. We are seeing virtual or ghost kitchens being made out of glorified shipping containers that are being located on parking lots. We have seen ghost kitchens that are in hotels, ghost kitchens that are in malls, and rumor has it they're starting to look into my basement. So there are a lot of different ghost kitchens. They're the facility that hosts brands for takeout and delivery. A virtual brand is a brand that can exist in a ghost kitchen, or it can go into existing kitchen space. There are an estimated 100,000 virtual brands operating in the United States today. A virtual brand is a potential massive game changer in the restaurant space. Just this morning, I wrote about Bloomin' Brands taking its Tender Shack virtual brand concept to 725 locations. So essentially, almost overnight, Outback and Carrabba's added another brand into its kitchens that is now available all over the country. Chili's has done this with It's Just Wings, its chicken wing brand. But we are also seeing brands that are popping up literally overnight. One of the biggest and the one that I am watching very closely is Mr. Beast Burger, which opened in December with over 300 locations, where it opens in a combination of ghost kitchens and in existing restaurants such as Bertucci's. And if you start thinking about that, the ability for a brand to operate, to suddenly get nationwide penetration with almost no capital costs and relatively, comparatively little effort. If you're in the restaurant space, you know how hard it is to get a restaurant brand up and running. These guys are starting it up almost instantly. Mr. Beast Burger has one of the 40 most popular food and drink apps on the Apple Store. The last time I checked, it is getting hugely popular, and it started up almost literally overnight. That is a massive game changer for an industry that usually takes a lot of money to get up and started, running over 300 brands. So that is the context for you. You want to hear less from me and more from this fantastic panel that we have today. of really good experts who can really tell you about this topic from really from the ground floor. Joy, I would like to start with you. Could you please explain Kitchen United and what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Joy, Chief Operating Officer for Kitchen United. Kitchen United, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a pioneer in the ghost kitchen space. Like Jonathan explained, we typically build commercial kitchen centers with 10 to 20 restaurants within them. And we typically partner with existing restaurant brands to operate in our facility. And the reason that they're excited about it is that it's turnkey, it's capital light. We use data science to figure out what are the best trade areas to be in, and we build our kitchen centers so that we're closest to consumers that we want to reach, right? This topic is especially interesting. I think, ghost kitchens in my mind has been popular for some time, addressing the need for off-premise. Obviously, COVID and the pandemic has accelerated those things, as well as virtual brands. We do have members that, like I said earlier, most of them are existing restaurant brands. So they have definitely dipped their toes into virtual brands and have launched, 1 to 4 and even 5 operating out of the same kitchen. We also have some members that are completely, delivery only virtual brand operators. So can talk a little about the learnings that we're seeing there. Obviously not share their financials, but can certainly address, the experience that they're having and what makes them successful.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk briefly about how the relationship, let's say I'm an operator and I have a delivery only concept and I really want to locate in 5 of your ghost kitchens. How does the leasing arrangement work in operations?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some differences by market, as you would expect with real estate in general. But our model is a restaurant will come to our team, we'll assess their brand and kind of their idea to see if they're a good fit for the trade area. And we do use a lot of our data behind it to curate the members in our facility. One, we ideally don't want them to, be competing with other members, but we also want to make sure that the trade area has enough demand for their cuisine or there's a gap there so that we can fill them and that they'll, be successful out of the gate. Once they come to us, our model is a monthly membership fee, and that varies by market. There's also a KU channel fee, and that the Kitchen United channel is a demand generation tool that we use to drive orders and business to the restaurants so that really that trade area knows a lot about Kitchen United Mix. And, what the community has really loved is the ability to order from multiple restaurants all on one ticket. So, when my husband wants sushi, I want burgers, my kids want fries or Mediterranean food, right? Whatever it is, you can have that all arrive together on one order with a driver. And that's, been really, really exciting for the community as well as for the restaurants to, be a part of that because, you might not feel like the same cuisine every single day, but you'll repeat much more frequently if there's variety and it's convenient and the food comes to you hot and fresh. And so I think that's one of the things that really differentiates us.
Mm-hmm. Do you tend to have relationships mostly with chains or with independents or a combination?
So we try to have a combination. I don't know if the rule is a third, but national brands, regional leaders, and then also have a mix of local favorites as well. And I think, where we see the most creativity is definitely in the local favorites because they just have more freedom to be, who they want to be. And so I definitely, I think when we think about who has the most virtual brands operating out of a single kitchen, it's honestly those operators who, we have one operator in Scottsdale that I'm thinking of right now. He used to run a food truck, Hawaiian food, and, quickly he came up with a noodle concept and paired it with several other concepts. We also have a sushi operator out of the same one, and she's launched, a ramen concept. So a lot of cuisines that can utilize the same equipment, but bring that variety that the consumer is looking for.
Mm-hmm. Scott, let's shift things over to you a little bit. You guys are doing some fascinating things, and I would like to talk to you a little bit about what you're doing with virtual brands right now.
Sure. So with Let Us Entertain You as a company, we have a number of restaurants around the country, many different concepts. And over the course of the past year, we've launched, I believe, around 9 or 10 different brands virtually. Some of those are new concepts. Some of those are concepts that were restaurants in the past that we kind of brought back to life in a virtual setting, which has been quite popular. And the vast majority of those, pretty much all of those, are housed out of existing lettuce restaurants using, capacity within the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. So you're operating in your existing locations right now?
Yeah, for the most part, yes. We have a couple that we are testing outside of lettuce restaurants, but currently we're primarily in Let Us Entertain You restaurants. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, I understand some of these virtual brands actually once were freestanding restaurants at one point. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. A number of them were. We have Papagus, which is a Greek restaurant that we had, which was just brought back about a month ago. We brought back Brasserie Joe, which was a very popular restaurant in Chicago that we brought back for a period of time. Ben Pao has been brought back, Vong's Thai Kitchen. So, yeah, that's been very fun and exciting for customers to kind of reminisce for some of those restaurants that they've missed throughout the years. And then we've also, there have been some new concepts that have been created. One is B Squared Pizza, Detroit style pizza that we have in 2 locations, actually, one in Chicago and one in the north suburb. That's very popular. And so we've done a little bit of both in terms of concept creation.
Mm-hmm. And could you describe a little bit, on the new concepts that you created?
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about what went into the creation of the concept? And is there any key differences in how you went about creating the new concept versus, say, one that you are planning for a brick and mortar location?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, in terms of the menu engineering, when you are creating a brick and mortar restaurant, you're doing food tastings pretty much when the food is cooked. When we are doing R&D for a virtual restaurant, we're tasting the food a good 20 minutes after it's been prepared. Not all food. We want the food to be delicious when the guest receives it. And in a brick and mortar restaurant, that's a lot faster than they will receive it in a delivery setting. And so we kind of look at the presentation and things like that, and how that product will travel. So that's very, very important. The other thing is in a brick and mortar restaurant, presentation, plate presentation is obviously very important. You want the dish to look really just eye-catching when it hits the table. In a delivery setting, we focus heavily on presentation of the packaging, making sure that we're adding things and doing things that are creating a memory, if you will, and trying to create appeal both in the packaging when they receive it and things like that. And so that's been it definitely has changed our thinking in that regard, but it's been a very fun exercise.
Mm-hmm. Super. John Miller, I understand that Denny's has been doing a few things on the virtual brand front. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, as everybody knows, we've been around for 68 years building, sort of different equities in different eras. And if you go all the way back, we started as a donut shop and then sort of became this 24-hour, 4-day part diner. And then we spent considerable number of years, better than 30, building just breakfast equities. And so now we're sort of back to trying to build all 4-day parts. So when these virtual opportunities came our way, there were a number of things that we considered, but what sells best dinner and late night, what's in the wheelhouse of our cooks, what capacity do we have to add brands, and what might later be able to build a back end equity inside the core brand, even if this is a virtual brand that's considerably distanced from the core brand. And so all those things go into the pot, and a couple of new brands were born. A number of them were considered. One is called the Burger Den, and one is called the Meltdown. These are really around the equities we have for melts. We sell, a Moons Over My Hammy sandwich, a Grand Sandwich, what we call the Superbird, which is a turkey melt. And these have been really popular, top-selling items for quite a number of years in the brand. But we've not really chased that gourmet melt category. But we think there's tremendous potential of it, and it's a little bit more difficult to break through the burger noise in the third-party world. So the combination of our cooks being quite good at it, the ability to expand that menu line with little SKUs, the fact that it comes out of one station for simplicity on sort of a slower shifts, the fact that we had capacity and the opportunity to build transactions that sort of lend itself to this trial. We do have a considerable number of franchisees that have signed up to roll this out, and we're just now going into rollout phase. So, but the early going looks pretty promising. Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that these brands will? I mean, I assume that the hope or the strategy is that these should be able to build incremental sales that you'll be able to keep once we've returned to whatever normal is going to be like after this.
That's right. So no one really knows what happens in the family dining or dine-in market. We think that there's going to be some pent-up demand. If you look at all the sort of reports and people that opine on that, we don't know if that's short-lived, long-lived. Will white collar ever go back to work and work in a traditional office or hotel? And if you're not out to work, are you going to be out to eat at breakfast or lunch? So will boomers and seniors wait until there's 200 million vaccines before they feel a little more confident? So these things sort of play a bigger role in family dining with a larger percentage of people that are boomers and seniors in our category than casual or quick serve. And so the building these equities in to-go business and third-party delivery, which have been historically lower for family dining, you don't want to miss this window and the opportunity to do it. So back to your question, the ability to build these third-party delivery audiences, we do believe ultimately finds their way back into the brand to build brand equities, and some of our top sellers would wind up on our menu eventually.
So were these the menu items that you're building these brands around? Were these existing menu items that you have, or did you add to it or continue with the innovation and things like that?
Yeah, most of these are new. So the Meltdown, for instance, rather than Texas toast, this is artisan sourdough bread. That's shredded pork or beef brisket or pot roast melts. I mean, each one of these things will have a little bit higher culinary standard, a direction which we've been taking the brand, especially after 5, and maybe a little bit of a nice surprise for people to say, oh, that came from Denny's. I might give them another try. We do make sure that it's discoverable in both the Meltdown and the Burger Den, that this is by Denny's. It's not certain at the top of the page, but we certainly want to be transparent, let people know where that comes from, that anybody that wanted to investigate. So again, I think these all have benefits over time. And I will tell you that our third-party delivery market is the inverse of what happens inside. So our dine-in all day is about 60% over 45. Our takeout is about 60% under 45. So we do have younger audiences and pretty strong evidence that in both the virtual concepts, a high degree of incrementality. In other words, not people regularly using the brand today.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the kids prefer it going online for their food then.
And so, perhaps newer brands that are, have more interesting names on their products and sort of a new foundational reputation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Joy, I have a question for you. So what I understand is that that demand for ghost kitchen space is pretty heavy right now. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very fortunate right now that we're full. We're operating in 5 markets today: Chicago, Los Angeles, Scottsdale, Arizona, and Austin, Texas, which we opened during COVID. And the 5th market we just launched in is Northern California in San Jose, in partnership with the Westfield Valley Fair Mall, which is the largest shopping destination in Northern California. And that's definitely been an interesting model where we don't actually run the kitchens, but we partner with the mall and the restaurants within the mall to help unlock off-premise demand for them, as well as create more channels that the employees, the mall employees, can leverage to order their food ahead.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question that we've had come in. How do multiple kitchens gather? How do you get food on site from all these different brands? How does that work?
Absolutely. So in every location, including this new one that we've just launched at, we have a pickup center. The pickup center is basically a minimal, like, front of house, if you will. Actually, pre-COVID, in many of our locations, we actually had shared seating out, and people could actually enjoy their meals together, or even though it's in takeout packaging. And so our teams consolidate the orders at the front of house. We also utilize technology like conveyor belts to bring the food up into that distribution area, or it's our team that actually employs the food runners, and we consolidate everything, and then we hand it off to the driver or the consumer who's picking it up, and manage kind of the orders.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there a centralized area where all of this is gathered, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the conveyor belts, if it's there, it will bring it out to the front. Our team will grab the bag off of the conveyor, and we have our tech stack, which kind of tells us what are the orders, what's the total order, and what should be consolidated and what not. And then we match it to the driver or the consumer who's arriving. So it's definitely, there's a consolidation point kind of front of house.
Right. Okay. Next question. I think this is actually for both Scott and for John. Scott, we'll start with you. What kind of distribution challenges have you encountered? Have you you had to do anything regarding distribution on these virtual brands, or is it just your existing contracts?
Just our existing contract. We haven't, in terms of sourcing or things like that, that has not been an issue for us thus far. It's mm-hmm. getting, certainly as product, as we work through different concept ideation and things like that, finding various products has been a bit of a challenge. But once we get it up and rolling, there hasn't been any issue whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. John Miller, same question. Is any distribution challenges on your virtual concepts, or is it just largely a lot of existing SKUs?
No, much like Scott, we have added a number of SKUs, but I think it's like 17 SKUs for 15 or 16 burgers and 11 melt sandwiches. So a lot of the SKUs were already in-house, and with the number of distribution centers we have and the SKUs we already manage, that's a small roundup to what we manage today, and within, an easy accommodation of our contracts for distribution.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I would like to encourage people to ask questions away. The more you ask, the less I have to ask, and that's less work for me, and that's all better for everybody involved here. So here's actually a big question for all three. And this time, John Miller, I'm going to start with you. When do you know that you have a concept that's ready for the big leagues? And then how fast, when we have a virtual brand, how fast can you ramp that up?
Well, in our case, it's when our franchisees fall in love with the idea. And in our brand, our culture is to go with the franchisees. We all go together, or we don't go at all. So our brand advisory councils, whether it be marketing, operations, supply chain management, or a good hard look at the P&L and the margins, unless this makes sense, we just don't go. So I think from a testing perspective, to see third-party delivery does not have the margins of dine-in, And so it already has, the burden of having to prove the incrementality. So when it passes the test that would be associated with a virtual brand, then the enthusiasm grows. In any brand, there will be, some brands will have a brand mandate, a sort of a brand standard, the quarter pounder with cheese or what have you, that everybody has to carry on the menu. But good brands usually also have some flexibility. So in a program like this, we've created a soft roll based on sign up rather than, and we've had some encouragement based on the early results, but we've not gone out to our system and said this has to be in by X. And the signups have been.
Yeah. Nice. Scott, same question. How do you know that you have a brand that's ready for the big time?
Well, I think the guest is going to tell you first and foremost based on repeat visitation, based on feedback from them, and so on and so forth. I think another very important element is how do you operate? The simplicity. Can you achieve that level of consistency frequently as you get busier and busier? Sometimes when you're developing the concept, it makes perfect sense, when you start to do it. But as you get into a weekend night or a snowy evening, which we've certainly had experience lately, orders definitely ramp up. And can you, is it scaling the way that you intended it to scale? And so we try to think through as many of those beforehand, but it takes a little time to just work through, especially when you're rolling out a new concept. It takes a little time just to figure that out and to make sure that it's going to be received the same way every time.
Mm-hmm. Joy, I'd really like your perspective on this because I know you work with a lot of different virtual brands that kind of didn't really have a brand beforehand. How do you know when a virtual brand is working or not?
I would echo a lot of what, Scott just said, just around the pre-work that you do in the, R&D cycle, understanding the trade area demand, taking those data points, corroborating it with other data that you might have, right? But ultimately, and making sure that it fits within your operation within the kitchen. But ultimately, I think what people like about virtual brands is it's cheap to test, right? So they can turn something on, see if the consumers like it, get the feedback and tweak where needed, or say, maybe this brand is not working, right? We certainly, I know in the Q&A chat, I see some questions just around volume from some of the brands, and obviously they differ. But for a lot of our existing brands, when they have a primary brand that, they have a brick and mortar store as well, and then they launch a secondary virtual brand, we've seen it anywhere bump their revenues from 30 to 50% when they add on that new one. For the smaller operators, I'd say, sometimes there isn't a leading winner. Maybe all of those virtual brands are kind of, smaller brands in general. I'd say a good brand may be doing, $5,000 a week. And when you compound that with 3 or 4 brands, you get meaningful revenue, especially if it's all the same kitchen staff. And I think where you have commonalities in the ingredients that you're using, and, what was previously said around making sure those are incremental, and you're kind of leveraging that same the same team, I think that's where you can see a lot more of the value, even with the pressures that margins are, smaller through the delivery service marketplaces.
Mm-hmm. Does this model, like, the ghost kitchen model, and one of the concerns I think, and this is expressed in one question, is that one of the concerns that there is with delivery, and a lot of this depends heavily on the delivery market, and then the delivery companies have these upcharges. Does this make that delivery? Does this make that delivery model more palatable to operators? You know what I'm asking on that?
It does if it's incremental, right? If it's incremental volume and you can make that case and you believe it, then I think then you don't need the same margins that you would have demanded out of your brick and mortar store for your regular products. I think, when I talk to members that are obviously, seeing the pressures on their margins, I think that's actually why Kitchen United, we launched the Kitchen United Mix consumer facing brand about a year ago now. Time's flying. But that, we see, we want all of our members to be on as many marketplaces as possible so that they're getting as much demand as possible. I think having virtual brands, you get an extra storefront within those marketplaces. So we're pro and encouraging all of those things as long as the operations are smooth. Additionally, on our channel, Kitchen United Mix, or on kitchenunited.com, what we do encourage our members to participate there and have all their brands there, because that's where, we see these as shared consumers, and we provide all of that customer data to our brands so that they know who's buying from them. They can do, retargeting, remarketing, and really get a higher margin overall because they have access to those consumers that are their consumers, right? And I know with the marketplaces, sometimes it's challenging because it's kind of no longer your direct customer unless you did some good negotiating upfront, I think, with those agreements and stuff. So there is definitely pressure. You've got to make sure it's incremental. There are ways to do that. And I think, I think that's what most of our members really enjoy working with Kitchen United, because I think we being a pioneer in this space, we have a lot of experience tackling those exact things with a lot of similar brands. We don't have all the answers and we're still learning for sure. But I think, we have a model that can make the restaurants profitable and us as well succeed through their success. And so, we're really proud of what we've developed here.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you mentioned in your comments, Joy, is that it kind of leads me to this question. One of the things that I mentioned early on is this: virtual brands are a potential game changer because you can start it up, with relative ease and with dramatically lower capital costs. And Scott, because you guys have a bit of a history on developing concepts and starting them and getting them off the ground and running them real well. I mean, could you talk a little bit about how much this changes that creation game? And do you think that the possibility for virtual brands makes your job easier at all going forward permanently, or is this just sort of a temporary thing?
I don't view it as temporary at all. Certainly, if you think of the number of components that go into planning for and building a brick and mortar setting, to create a virtual brand is completely different than that. And so there's far fewer elements that you need to focus on versus opening a brick and mortar, for sure. So to that extent, yes, it definitely makes it more efficient and easier to do that. I think that I also wanted to add that with virtual brands in existing restaurants, you can focus on day parts that you can menu engineer or create concepts based on the day part that you're actually looking to drive. If you have a really successful breakfast lunch concept and you want to drive more dinner business, then you can think about a brand that may be more dinner centric versus lunch. So that's something that's very, very interesting and very exciting. And so I definitely think that it will continue, and I definitely think that more and more and more creativity will come of it.
Mm-hmm. I hear John Miller. Is that's sort of one of the goals of your virtual concepts, is to sort of build business at different times of day?
Well, we would like to build. We're open 24 hours, so we'll take guests that have a need at any time of day, but we are softer and on a quest to build equity after 5. We want more people to think about us at dinner and late night, and when they do come in, to see a broader array of menu selections that could delight the palate beyond breakfast items. Right now our breakfast mix is just a little north of 60% of mix all day long. Strongest day part still lunch, but at dinner, we'd like to sell more dinner items and have the credibility. So having trial come through these channels where people are shopping online and have, I'd say, for a few bucks, and we can try an entree and see, We can look at the picture. If one of these third-party marketplaces has you on the front page or two, there's a reason for that. I think in your subconscious, you think you got there somehow, you earned it somehow, maybe through high scores or high frequency, or you're in my trade area and worth a try. And so that prominence plays a role in building a brand and creates trial. And there may be people that have driven past us for a long, long time, or their parents weren't users of the category, so the kids weren't. They try these products and then discover we have them there. So one, it's to build transactions in a soft period. Two, it's to build credibility for the brand long-term to dine in. And three, it's to have, permanent installations of virtual brands. I think they all play a role in building, earnings for our franchisees, and also giving great experiences to our guests.
Mm-hmm. So we got a number of questions here. So let me ask this. What marketing best practices can you share for virtual brands? John, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'd say that their social media is a powerful thing. And traditional channels of broadcast you wouldn't do on really small brands. And so until you're scaled, you'd probably keep your money a little closer to your vest. But the interesting thing for us is to watch what people say through the regular channels, Google, Yelp, and pay very, very close attention to what people are saying. And then make sure you give real-time feedback to your operators, so that a server might know what someone said about that shift or that product, or a cook might know about a sandwich they sold. So if you give real-time feedback to people, and DoorDash or Uber or your third-party marketplaces like you, that combination at launch is going to be more powerful than just about anything else you can do.
Mm-hmm. Scott, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that was just said. I would also add that we certainly look and try to, with some of our concepts, take advantage of special days that come up. Valentine's Day, we ran, a Valentine's Day promotion, or we ran a Valentine's Day menu in some of our VRs that was very, very popular. So there's still opportunities and ways to communicate. And so trying to keep the menu robust and trying different things to keep it lively and keep people interested is something we're definitely focused on.
Mm-hmm. Joy, I also, you have any best practices that you could share from a marketing standpoint?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been challenged with this since the start. We don't have the luxury of having a big monument sign with the brand and everybody knowing who's coming into the space before it's open. And so, the guidance that we've given our members are really, you've got to have your digital storefront be the storefront. You have to have your local listings all up to date. You have to have the contact number, there so the customer can reach you. I'd echo, what the previous, what was previously said, just around, managing your reputation management tools, Yelp, Google My Business, even the reviews that come through the third-party marketplaces. That's really important as well, because that's actually what those marketplaces have used as algorithms to help drive, your search results too, so that more eyeballs are looking at you guys. Just around, I like the Valentine's Day ideas. I know a lot of our members have been really successful with having more family meal oriented items, so that it's, really easy for consumers to be ordering, and find ways to surprise and delight them, even though you don't have that dine-in experience. You were asking earlier, about, will the virtual brands, what will they do kind of post-pandemic? And, I think personally, I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but I personally think, some of them, these virtual brands will become real brands, right? Some of them might actually open a brick and mortar because of that real brand and the success of what it has been. And that means that the consumer loves the food. They're repeating all of those things that you would want to see in a brick and mortar. Those things are coming true. I'd say, as capacity shrinks because dine-in is recovering and people are looking for that, that's the fabric of our social, communities, right? Dining in and enjoying meals with our friends and family and loved ones, etc. And so, I think when that capacity shrinks, you're really only going to continue to invest in it if it's incremental and and it's working, right? So I think some of those brands may go away, right? And you would expect that with any kind of brand development cycle, that maybe those just didn't make it for the time. So I do feel like there's going to be some changes. I'll continue to see growth with virtual brands, but not all of them will stay, right? There's got to be a demand for in the community that people want that cuisine, and it's got to be good enough that it's a real brand.
Yeah, and with so many of them, it seems like it's going to be very difficult to break through that clutter to me. That's where I think one of the biggest challenges is we got 100,000 brands and these things are popping up all the time. Getting known in this particular in this particular space is going to be a fairly significant challenge to me. So next question, I think. So, Scott, we'll start with you this time. Are your concepts, do you use data to drive what kind of concepts you create? Are they data driven, and do you test names and things like that?
For the concepts that we've created, it's not necessarily data driven. For the ones that I previously mentioned, it's more focused on things that we feel operationally we can do well, and frankly, some of them had proven themselves in the past. So we had many years of data to know that it would be received quite well. So I can't say that we've used overabundance of data to create the concepts that I was referring to.
Mm-hmm. Did you use data test, or did you test menu mix or age, gender, or day part?
Yeah, well, in our menu engineering, we certainly in our R&D process, we certainly took it into account which day part we were looking to drive, and created menu items and price points that we thought were reflective of that day part for sure. Yes.
Mm-hmm. John Miller, same question. Are your concepts data driven? Did you test the concept name, menu mix, or age, or gender, or day part?
Was that a John question or a Joy question?
Yeah, that's you. That's you, John. Yep.
All right.
This is a question
so loud,
from.
I put it on mute. So I apologize. There they go again.
Okay.
So we are going to use data at our scale with 1,600 restaurants. So we'll have some of those resources. I will tell you, as a big lettuce fan, that sometimes the gut, which digests all that data in real time without reading through the deck, is just about as good. So we'll do turf studies from time to time and sort of check out what's going on. You're going to look at mix. Mix is an interesting barometer. There'll be things that low mix, but they bring in a regular user that brings in a big crowd that buys the high selling items on your menu, but that person wants a specialty item. Certainly vegan, healthy options might be lower mixing, but they're very, very important to eliminate veto votes. So mix won't always tell the whole story. But for instance, in the meltdown, we tested different names for the concept. And this one, scored the best among consumers that were using our third-party market in some of our top third-party market stores. And so we felt like there'd be an opportunity to gain trial. Whether or not that was the right approach or not, the gut, will tell over time. We had an item we started out with actually 12 sandwiches. One was called the Figgy Piggy. That name, there was a lot of excitement about it. It was a pulled pork sandwich. It had some goat cheese, some fig jam on sourdough, It was a spectacular sandwich, and how they had a little bit of a sweet slaw on it, and it was a terrific sandwich. But for whatever reason, the trade areas we're in, the average household income might have scared a few people, and it maybe wasn't the name as much as it was a couple of the ingredients were just a little uncommon for an everyday diner. So I think testing has its role in sort of keeping you from making big mistakes, and you wouldn't build a supply chain for 1,600 restaurants without first knowing the answer to some of those questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would just add, in terms of evolving the menu, that is very, very important. Obviously, knowing what people are resonating with, what price point they are, that they seem to be ordering more items from, and what they're comfortable with price point wise, and where they see value and things like that. That level of data certainly helps evolve the menu over time, which is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Super. So can you please, here's the next question. Can you please talk about the future opportunity for off-premise alcohol provided by virtual brands, especially with so many states sort of allowing alcohol delivery? Is there potential down the road? Scott, you seem to be the most likely to be able to answer this question.
Well, there's certainly potential. Alcohol is not, for the concepts that we have, alcohol is something, an add-on to the basket.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that I personally feel. I think they're coming to our menus and coming to our restaurants for the food that we're offering. And oh, by the way, we happen, do you want to add a bottle of wine with your order out of convenience? So, in terms of, what is approved and what is allowed for delivery with alcohol and how that evolves, I'm curious to find out, but I don't have a tremendous amount of insight in that arena.
I can jump in and add a little bit. We're launching our sixth location in the Loop area for Chicago. There is an existing bar in the location that we've took over. It was an old food hall, and so we will be having alcohol off premise as well as on premise. And so for all of our restaurants that are operating within our facility, if the order is placed via Kitchen United Mix, alcohol can be a piece of that delivery. And I know some of the restaurants that are planning on moving in are pretty interested in developing even mocktails that can go along with it, and promoting, their specialty beverage sales as well. So hopefully that kind of tackles the question.
Mm-hmm. Would that would be your first such bar at a Kitchen United? Yeah.
Yes, it's our first time. We're excited.
All right. Yeah. I mean, alcohol delivery is going to be one of the big interesting things going forward, and how that ends up evolving is going to be fascinating to watch and see where that goes. Let's see. So, Joy, let's start with you on this question. How do you build awareness of your brand to drive trial of a brand when the consumer is not necessarily familiar with it? So how do you get consumers, I guess, to try a brand the first time?
Yeah, I think John and Scott probably have ideas around this. I as it relates to virtual brands, for sure, what we've seen be more successful with a lot of our partners and in their naming convention is honestly just being very straightforward. If it's a vegan product, have vegan in the name on the marketplaces, so it's very clear, and it's those keywords will match with what the consumer is looking for, if you will. Doghouse is one of our partners. They obviously have their portfolio of absolute brands, and what's included is like badass breakfast burrito, right? Something that catches the consumer's attention, but it's very clear what the product is, and gets them to try. Obviously, pictures really help with that, and things like that. So, if you don't have a storefront, you need to recreate that experience online through the storefronts that you do have digitally, and so that piece is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. John Miller, same question. How do you get people to try your virtual concept at first?
Yeah. So again, I think going back to the comment earlier, the right out the gate, you're going to do a little social media, and you're going to rely on your third-party marketplace to give you some prominent billing to see if there's going to be trial. That is a codependency there for partnership. So you launch, 100,000 brands that all want to get online with you. If you're a third-party delivery firm, you want to take those, but you don't want to turn down somebody with 1,600 units ready to go. So it's you leverage that relationship to see what kind of trial you can get.
Mm-hmm. Scott, same question. How do you get people to try your virtual concept for the first time?
I agree with everything Joy was saying. I think that all of you to really take a lot of time going through the delivery portal and making sure that every piece of it is really as descriptive as possible. Great imagery and great photos we find is very important. I think that erring on the side of being more descriptive than less on menu items is important. So people really have a clear understanding of what the dish is, and making sure that elements, specific elements that can be tagged on the dish are clearly marked. If it's a vegetarian item, that should be noted. Be noted. So really making sure that your restaurant as it lives on that site is as well presented as it possibly can be.
Mm-hmm.
And Jonathan, if I could add to that, Joy and Scott's note real quick, I do think that that food photography remains as we tend to do in our dine-in menus, to the extent that the to-go packaging also makes it look nice. When you first pull the lid off, if it's appealing, it's a lot easier to eat. If it's a royal mess from sort of taking shortcuts with packaging, it's really hard to get a second visit. So that does play a tremendous role. Repeat is what this is all about. Driving trials only part of the equation.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to that extent, it's very similar to a brick and mortar restaurant. Guests are going to, you're going to do whatever you can to get them to try you once, but how their experience resonates with them is really going to define the longer term success. So I completely agree.
Yeah. I think that, to me, and maybe I'm off on this, but with a virtual brand, the app, you have only one opportunity really to impress the customer, and that's with the food and how it arrives. Whereas, if I was to go into one of Scott's restaurants, or if I was to go into Denny's, I might get really good service at that particular point. The atmosphere might be, there's a different combination of things that might or might not work. To be able to get somebody to come to a potential, to a second time. If that food arrives and there was a mistake on a virtual concept, you've lost me. As a customer. That's happened to me relatively recently. At a bad experience with a virtual brand. I just vowed I would never go again. And to me, it seems like with one of these concepts, the importance of making sure that everything gets done properly, and that this food arrives to that customer in as good a shape as you can get on a delivery situation is super important. So I think let's see. Here's actually a question I'd like to ask. This is for me to Scott and John. One of the concerns I have going forward is that virtual brands are sort of occupying existing facilities, like existing capacity within kitchens. So that have existed in part over the past several months because the pandemic has decreased dine-in service. What happens when business at your core restaurants start increasing? What happens to these virtual brands? What do you do? How do you protect that virtual brand that you've created from sort of losing the focus of the kitchen staff? Scott, any thoughts on that?
It's a very good question, and I think that how I think how the menu is engineered and making sure the concept can work seamlessly within your brick and mortar operation is very important. And so, as that data comes in as to what's selling and what's not selling, and as you look to make tweaks and changes, making sure that you're keeping in mind how the consistency and how the efficiency is going to stay in place as your operation changes behind the scenes it's going to be important to be very thoughtful and proactive in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. John, same question. How do you protect your virtual brand? Once business at Denny's ramps back up, how do you protect your virtual brand, or operations at Denny's as your kitchens become busier once dine-in service returns?
Well, I think you're trying to protect, the core brand and the virtual brand, the equity you built in that. And there's always trade-offs on what you can do. Sort of Barton favorite quote from my dad, you can do anything in life you want, you just can't do everything. So, I can teach somebody deep saute skills. We can make a beurre blanc if we want to, but we're probably not going to do that in our kitchen. Our SKUs and sort of the brand equities we built are really around a grill and a fryer. Not that we don't sell a good salad and a soup from time to time, but this is a diner operation, and by nature with 4 day parts, you already have a large menu, and so the virtual brands playing to strengths that you already have and how your line is set up with a limited number of new SKUs makes this easy to start. And so if it's things you're really doing a lot of and you want to do more of it, you add capacity, you add a cook, but you can't have 200 menu items or 300. There's a certain limitation per restaurant, and it doesn't matter. You can't just add bodies to it, right? It doesn't work like that. So I think knowing your limitations and managing each line. One of the things I think Joy is able to do, and I don't have a clue what I'm talking about, Joy. Yeah, making things up here. But you can add capacity by adding another line, right? So, but inside a given brand or a given line, it does have a limitation, and you do have to protect that. So the ticket times, quality of presentation, sloppiness, frustration, even in a given shift, those are all managed to the benefit of your culture and the outcome you want for your guest. But I think it's a very good question that has to be managed.
Yeah, to your point, John, thanks for the shout out. Definitely, I think one of the answers is if that virtual brand, there is so much demand that you need more capacity for it. That's where John and Scott, they call me. And, I used to get more of these calls before, I'd say, where restaurants, they're already in the same trade area as our kitchen center, but they want to offload that demand. And honestly, more recently, I'm already seeing some of those calls start coming through again, which is encouraging because the restaurants are doing well. And, they want to protect that experience, that in-dining experience with their guests. And so pushing out some of the off-premise demand into our facility that is built for it, that helps them, and they can provide kind of a better experience all around.
Mm-hmm. Joy, one of the solutions that one person brought to me when I brought this, not here, obviously, but somewhere else, when I brought up the question of capacity inside the kitchens, is like, oh, you can turn the brand off. That would seem to be like not necessarily a good idea. I mean, can you turn these brands off, or is that a good idea?
I agree with you. I think once you train the consumer that you're there, you want to be on. Could you temporarily pause, 86 your items, sure. But I think if you want to be there, you find a way to be there for your consumer. And ideally, you're not teaching them like, I'm sometimes here, I'm not, So I don't think that that's a great solution if there is demand for your product.
Right. Super. Well, we are just about out of time, but I would like to thank you guys very much for joining us on this webinar. And Chris, I will throw it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. I'd like to thank Joy, Scott, John, and Jonathan again for spending the time with us and sharing their insights. For all our audience members today, please keep an eye on your inbox in the coming days for an email link with a recording video of this webinar. And we also invite you to continue the conversation on DMA's LinkedIn page. So with that said, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.